All right, here we are again. Welcome back. Let's just continue this story. At the point we're at right now, Taylor is about to confront Michael about what she saw him do to the boys that were beating him up. Okay, suddenly Taylor grabbed my arm. Michael, we need to talk. No, we don't, I said. I kept walking, leaving her standing there. Austin looked at me in amazement. Dude, that was Taylor Ridley you just brushed off. I looked at him. So? He smiled. That was so cool. Taylor ran in front of me and stopped. She looked at Austin. Excuse us, please. Sure, Austin said, looking thrilled that Taylor had spoken to him. After he'd taken a few steps back, she turned to me. Please. I can't, I replied. I need to know, Taylor said. I really, really need to know. I just looked at her. What did you do to Mr. Polson? I don't know what you're talking about, she said, mimicking what I'd written to her on the note. Oh, I'm going to pause for a minute because I'm starting to get vibes that Taylor is also one of the missing children with special powers. Like maybe she has mind control or something because Mr. Polson just like stopped talking to them and getting them in trouble and changed what he was saying. Maybe that's why Taylor is so interested in knowing what Michael did to the boys because maybe Taylor is thinking that she has found someone that's like her. I'm just guessing, but that's what I'm starting to think. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, mimicking what I'd written on to her on the note. You did something, I said. I saw it. Really? Well, so did you. Nothing I can tell you about. Michael, please, it's important, she grimaced. I'm begging. Dude, she's begging, Austin said, forgetting that he wasn't supposed to be listening. Taylor turned to him. Excuse me, she said sharply. Austin wilted beneath her gaze. Sorry. This time he crossed to the opposite side of the hall. I looked at her for a moment, then said, I'd get killed for telling you. No one will ever know, I promise. She crossed her chest with her finger, crossed my heart. I looked over at Austin, who was still pretending not to listen. He shook his head. Taylor looked at him, then back at me and sighed. Michael, I really need to know. I promise I'll never tell anyone. She leaned in closer. I'll even tell you my secret. She just stood there staring at me the way Austin stared at jelly donuts. Then she put her hand on my arm. Please, Michael, it's more important than you can possibly imagine. She looked so desperate I wasn't sure what to do. Finally, I said, I couldn't tell you here anyway. We can go to my place, she said quickly. I live just down the street. No one's home. Austin looked at me in amazement. I could guess what he was thinking. Dude, Taylor Ridley just invited you to her house. I can't, I said. I have after-school detention. That's okay. I'll wait for you, she said eagerly. Don't you have cheerleading or something? Only on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Fridays if there's a game. She looked deeply into my eyes. Please. Okay, I'm going to pause again, because now I'm thinking if she has mind control, then she could just make Michael Vey tell her what she wants him to tell her. So I'm not sure now, but I do think she probably has powers too. That's what it seems to be hinting at. Saying no to the girl you have a crush on is hard enough, especially when she's begging. But I had also run out of excuses. I exhaled loudly in surrender. Where do you want to meet? Taylor smiled. I'll just go with you. To detention? I don't think they'll try to keep me out, do you? I don't know. No one ever tries to get into detention. It's like breaking into jail. Taylor smiled. Then I guess we'll find out. Hey, said Austin, who had inched his way back into our conversation. What about me? Taylor looked at him. What about you? I'm Michael's best friend, Austin, he said, eagerly putting out his hand. Taylor just looked at him. He's my friend, I said. What do you want? She asked. I want to come with you guys. We can trust him, I said. She looked him over, then turned back to me. Sorry, but I can't. I looked at Austin and shrugged. Sorry, man. He frowned. All right, see you guys later. As Austin walked away, Taylor turned to me. Let's go, you delinquent. We walked down the hall together, something I had never thought would happen in a million years. I wondered if Taylor might be afraid to be seen walking with me. Like her popularity quotient might fall a point or two. I wasn't sure how that worked, but she didn't seem to care. She must have said hi about 100 times between my locker and detention. As usual, I felt invisible. As we walked into the lunchroom, Miss Johnson looked at Taylor quizzically. Taylor was one of those students who was always the teacher's pet. Perfect citizenship, Always got her homework done, raised her hand to speak, never a cause of trouble. I once overheard a teacher say, if only I could have a classroom of Taylors. Do you need something, Taylor? Miss Johnson asked. No, Miss Johnson, I'm here for detention. I'm surprised to hear that, Miss Johnson looked down at her clipboard. I don't have you on my list. I know. I didn't get in trouble or anything. I'm just waiting for my friend Michael. Miss Johnson nodded. That's very kind of you, being supportive of a friend. But detention isn't a place to hang out. Taylor just looked at her with big, soft brown eyes. Please, I really think I can help him change his ways. I turned and looked at her. Miss Johnson smiled. Well, if you really want to help, I don't see why not. But you can't sit together. We can't have talking. Taylor flashed a smile. That's okay, Miss Johnson. I've got a lot of homework to catch up on. She waved to me. Be good. She sat down at Miss Johnson's table, grinning at me. I'm pretty sure that Taylor was the happiest person to ever go to detention. Frankly, I wasn't hating it too much myself. I couldn't believe the best-looking girl at school was in detention waiting for me. The lunchroom was at least 10 times more crowded than the day before, which meant that there was either a sudden outbreak of misbehaving or Mr. Dahlstrom had had a bad day. I was about to sit at the end of a long table near the back wall of the cafeteria when someone said, Not there, tickerhead. I looked up. Cody Applebaum, a 6-foot ninth grader, was walking toward the table, sneering at me. That's my side of the table. I had no idea what a tickerhead was. Whatever, I said. I walked to the opposite end of the table and sat down. I opened my algebra book, unfolded the day's worksheet, and began doing my homework. About 5 minutes into my studying, something hard hit me on the head. I looked up at Cody, who was laughing. He had a handful of marbles. Knock it off, I said, rubbing my head. Knock it off, he mimicked. Puny wimp, go tell your mama. Sometimes I felt like I was wearing a sign that said, Pick on me. I went back to my book. A few seconds later, another marble hit me in the head. I looked up. Cody was now leaning against the wall on the back 2 legs of his chair. He raised his fist and bared his teeth like an angry baboon. Stop it, I said. Make me. I went back to my studying. Less than a minute later, another marble hit me in the head. As I looked up, I noticed a metal trim that ran along the wall where Cody was leaning. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was still feeling great from finally putting Jack in his place. Maybe it was the obnoxious smirk on Applebaum's face, or maybe it was that I was showing off for Taylor. But most likely, it was the culmination of too many years of being bullied. Whatever the reason, I was done with playing the victim. I slowly reached back and touched the trim behind me and pulsed. Cody let out a loud yelp and fell back off of his chair, smacking his head against the wall, then the floor. When Miss Johnson stood up to see what had happened, Applebaum was lying on his back, rubbing the back of his head. Cody, quit screwing around. He looked up from the ground. Something shocked me. Right, Cody, I saw you leaning back on your chair, Miss Johnson said. One more outburst like that and I'm adding 2 days to your detention. Cody climbed back into his chair. Sorry, Miss Johnson. I looked over at Taylor. She was looking at me, slowly shaking her head. I shrugged. Miss Johnson let us out early again. On the way out of the cafeteria, Taylor said, Nice spending time with you, Miss Johnson. You too, Taylor. Miss Johnson glanced over at me. Hopefully your behavior will rub off on some of the other students. I hope so, she said. Taylor laughed when we were out of the cafeteria. Stick with me, Faye. Maybe my behavior will rub off on you. Thanks, I said sarcastically. Actually, I was happy to stick with her, but for other reasons. As we walked down the hall, Taylor asked, What did you do to Cody? Nothing, I said. Same nothing you did to Jack and his gang? I grinned. Maybe. Whatever you're doing, you shouldn't do it in public like that. You should talk. Besides, Cody started it. Doesn't matter, Taylor said. I turned to her. It does to me. I'm sick of being picked on and doing nothing about it. I opened the door for her, and we walked out of the school. I know, but if you keep doing it, someone's going to figure it out. Maybe, maybe not. We walked towards the back of the schoolyard. Where do you live? I asked. It's just through that fence over there and 2 houses down. So tell me about the other day when Jack was picking on you. You have to first tell me what you did to Mr. Polson. Taylor nodded. Okay, I'll tell you when we get to my house. Taylor's house Taylor's house was a tan rambler with plastic pink flamingos in the front yard and a small grove of aspens on the side. She took a key from her pocket and unlocked the door. "No one's home," she said. She stepped inside and I followed her. The house was tidy and nice, bigger than our apartment, but not by much. There was a large wooden frame picture of her family above the living room fireplace. She had 2 older brothers. Everyone in Taylor's family had blonde hair and blue eyes, except for Taylor. "Where's your family?" "My parents are at work. My brothers are in college. I usually only see them on weekends." "Where do your parents work?" "My mom works for a travel agency that does educational tours for high school students. My father is a police officer." Taylor turned on the lights and led me to the kitchen. "Want some juice or something?" "No, thanks. Go ahead and sit down." I sat down at the kitchen bar while she looked inside the fridge. I put my hand over my right eye, which was fluttering like a moth's wing. "How about some lemonade?" she asked. "Sure." She poured us both a glass, then sat down next to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do you blink like that?" I flushed. "I have Tourette's syndrome." "Tourette's syndrome? You mean like those people who shout out swear words for no reason?" "That's Tourette's, but I don't do that. I do other things." "Like blinking?" "Blinking. Sometimes I make gulping noises. Sometimes I make faces." "Why?" I shrugged. "No one really knows why. Tourette's is a neurological thing, so it can affect any part of my body." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes." She thought it over. "Is it okay that I'm asking you about this? I'm not trying to embarrass you. I just thought if we're going to be friends, I should know." What she said made me happy. "If we're going to be friends." "Yeah, it's okay." Taylor stood. Let's sit in the family room. You can bring your drink." We walked into the next room, then sat down next to each other on the sofa. I took a drink of lemonade and puckered. "Wow, that's sour." "My mom must have made it. She makes it really tart." Taylor took a sip. "Yep, Mom." I set down my glass. "So," she said, lacing her fingers together, "are you going to tell me what you did to those boys?" "You said you'd tell me your secret first." Taylor smiled nervously. "I know I did. It's just—" She looked at me with her beautiful brown eyes. "Please promise. Please, I promise I'll tell you. It's just easier if you go first." There was something about Taylor that made me feel like I could trust her. "Okay," I said. "What did you see?" All right, we'll go ahead and pause there, and then we'll hear their conversation next time. Bye.